I'm recording.
Yay! Record.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to mute yourself, Judy. Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome again. This is episode number 15. Wow, good for us. Okay, great. Well, our presenters today are Andrew Szymanski, who is the president of the U.S. Dragon Boat Federation. And also with us is Melanie Cantwell from the International Dragon Boat Federation. And in a second, I'm going to have you put your, or you can do it now, put your thingy on speaker view so that we're focused on Melanie. We're going to let Melanie go first. She's from Sydney, Australia. She's the first woman, the first female to be appointed to the International Dragon Boat Federation Competition and Technical Committee, and that was in 2010. So she's going to talk to us today about the International Dragon Boat Federation. We sort of know the International Dragon Boat Federation as sort of like the Barnum and Bailey of Dragon Boat, where they swing in, set up this massive event, run the event, and then knock it down, and 2 days later you can't tell anything was there. So Melanie's going to give us some insights into what is the IDBF, what goes on there, what's their role, and so on. And then followed by Andrew, who's going to be our second presenter, talking about the USDBF and its role in Dragon Boat. And we're going to hold you guys off in terms of questions until the end of the presentation. Okay, so Melanie, good morning.
Good morning. Yes, it is morning here.
Good to see you, and thanks again for doing this. I was thanking her like you wouldn't believe when we first contacted her this morning, and she said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I have to do this all the time because of where I live." You know, so I don't know if you become nocturnal down there, but thanks for joining us, and we're having you go first so we can all tuck you in later and you can get on with your sleep. So, as I mentioned, Melanie, the role of the International Dragon Boat Federation, it's well, it's one of the reasons that we're all here. You know, the Nations Cup, the Club Crew World Championships. Be interesting to know. I get a lot of questions about what is the IDBF. Some people, if they don't go to those events, don't know what the IDBF is. They know the acronym, but it doesn't seem to affect them, so they think. So, can you talk to us a little bit about, you know, how did the IDBF start and what is the role of it?
Wow. Okay. So the IDBF being the International Dragon Boat Federation. So if you equate it to, you know, all the sports have in a hierarchy, will have an international federation. There's usually continental federations that then come down to your national federations that then may come down to state or regional within those national federations. So it's quite a hierarchy that feeds down rules and competitions, whether it be soccer or cycling or swimming, athletics. It's a top-down approach. I guess that we all know it in clubland or in state level, it's more around the grassroots participation, whereas once you start moving upwards, the IDBF deal in that international scope of competition and trying to, I guess, grow and develop the sport worldwide, so that more countries are popping up to do dragon boating and supporting that development worldwide, which I guess for very developed countries, certainly like the US and even Australia, we tend to forget that there's countries that haven't seen dragon boating, and I know Cyprus is relatively new to dragon boating, and so, you know, a lot just haven't seen it. So that's one of IDBF's, you know, things that they do, is try and develop the sport worldwide. They will implement rules is one of the big things, so that in the hope that the rules that come down internationally feed down through the continental federations to the national federations. We do know there are obviously some changes that, depending on the countries, that may or may not work, but if the bulk of them filter down, then when clubs or nations do come to an international competition, the rules aren't completely foreign because they are filtering down, being consistent. Boats and equipment is another one that they tend to manage from the top down to ensure there's that consistency all the way through, from the boats and paddles that you guys use in clubland all the way up to an international level.
So are you the reason that I can't have my crew race without rigger paddles?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was one of the reasons many years ago when IDBF developed the paddle, because you can imagine when dragon boating, well, the first, I think, world competition in 1995 when it was in Yueyang in China. And for those who may have missed it, IDBF did a nice big anniversary a couple of months ago on the 25th anniversary of the Yueyang. And of course, IDBF as an organisation will be celebrating its 30th anniversary. Next year in 2021 will be IDBF's 30th anniversary of when they first became into being. So that's kind of going to be a nice thing to celebrate and see. When you look at I laughed when I looked at the program, getting off from the paddles though. When I looked at the program in 1995 and how many races they did in Yueyang, compared to how many we're now trying to squeeze into a day, I could go away and have a sleep and come back. Whereas nowadays we're pushing to get as many races in. So it's quite incredible how our sport's grown. But that's one of the reasons of development of the paddles, to try and make sure that there is consistency, which is what I was saying to Pat earlier. There is consistency in competition, that if the boats are all the same, identical, and the paddles are all identical, then what makes the difference between a winning crew is the effort the crew puts in, because everything else is the same.
Perfect.
There's no hidden wing keels on any boats or concaves in paddles or anything that could be seen to being an advantage.
Melanie, can we talk a little bit about I've got some of us on the call here have got some experience with dragon boat events and event production and that kind of thing. Blew my mind. It continues to blow my mind at the Club Crew World Championships when I see the numbers growing the way they are, and I see some of these poor volunteers that on day 5 barely hold. I don't know how they're holding it together, running over 100 races in a day. Stacking those boats up at the finish line, and your staff consists of volunteers that are from different countries, so there's language barriers, there's different interpretations that they all have of the, perhaps of the rules, partly because of the cultural differences and the language barrier. Like, how far is this going to go? How many athletes can you accommodate? And how big can that event get? Because right now, isn't it larger than the Winter Olympics?
Yeah, it's not quite the Summer Olympics, but I'd hate to see us get there. Yeah, look, Szeged in 2018 was just over 6,000 participants, and the numbers were clearly up, getting close to 6,300, 6,500 for France. Which was just an explosion. It's pretty scary on our end, trying to manage the number of races, trying to work out how we can actually accommodate between sunrise and sunset the number of races in for everybody. And I suppose is that what you would call one of IDBF, the opposite to IDBF success. So where I've just lost it's 1 o'clock in the morning, lost my train of thought. That whilst the championships have been a really big success, it's also been at the detriment as well, because now we actually can't cope with the numbers. that we're actually getting. So trying to find ways to keep those numbers now down to a manageable level to keep everybody happy is certainly proving challenging. And that only gets a little bit more challenging when more countries decide they want to participate as well.
So what's the plan? Is the plan to reduce the number of athletes, or is the plan to extend it in days, or what's
Andrew's laughing because of 2022. No, look, we're already on, I have to say, we're already on for club crews 6 days of racing and 5 days of racing for nations. I think it would pretty much kill all the race officials and the host organising committee, the volunteers, and all the athletes if we went to 7 days of racing. That's just a really expensive. If you can imagine trying to hire a venue for that amount of days, because then you've also got bump in and bump out to add on to the actual days of racing. So it just becomes quite an expensive task to manage that. What it will probably mean in the future is, instead of currently the 5 and the 2, it may mean that instead of 5 standard boats, that has to drop down to 4 standard boats or 3 standard boats, that per country per age division, that's allowed to compete. And at the end of the day, you are competing against the best in the world. And for the world, we want as many different nations there competing as possible.
It's 5 and 2 now, 5 standard, 2 small, is that what?
Correct.
Okay.
A few years ago, it was 5 small boats, but we had to drop those numbers because we couldn't squeeze them all in. So we've kept the standard and dropped the small, but I suspect in future years, depending if numbers keep growing, or if COVID decides to throw a curveball at us, that may be a natural attrition of numbers. We'll just have to look at it, but it's certainly that's one of the options. Another option has been played around, has been 2 separate championships, seniors in one and Prems juniors in another. But then that puts pressure on race officials, host organising committees, but also then parents. If parents are racing in seniors and their kids are racing in the juniors, they've got to go to 2 separate events. It's not so great either. And I think one of the things that many of us like about dragon boating is the fact that it's so eclectic, because we do get that widespread of ages right through from your juniors through to your seniors. And I always get so excited when I see the juniors race, because they're so, they're just so excited, and they go up and chat to anybody, and they're just loving dragon boating, and they certainly bring a breath of fresh air to our events.
Personally, I would hate to see you go to 2 events, but you have to do what you have to do, right?
Well, look, I think most of us would prefer to keep it all into the one, but clearly the trade-off is to keep it all in the one, we've got to lose some numbers somewhere.
Yeah, understood. So I'm going to ask you the question that I get asked all the time, and that is the elephant in the room. The sport's growing so fast, and more countries are getting involved. International competitions are more and more populated. The Europeans and the club crews and Nations Cup. What's going on with the Olympics?
What's going on with the Olympics? Oh, it is the elephant in the room. Look, IDBF have been probably for close to 20 years putting in their applications to the IOC for acceptance into the IOC family. Those applications go in every 4 or 6 years or whatever it is. Then they get knocked back for whatever reasons that the IOC deemed that IDBF hasn't done or needs to do or whatever, then, part of that was then the argument that the ICF decided they wanted to own dragon boating. And of course, two associations can't own dragon boating, for want of a better definition. And so that put paid to, a little bit of where things were headed until that got resolved. As I was saying to Pat earlier, I think one of the benefits, even if dragon boating never gets to appear at the Olympics either as a demo sport or as a sport, which I seriously doubt, because we just are too big a sport in numbers to be able to do that. The benefit of actually gaining that Olympic acknowledgement would be for national federations like the USDBF or USDBF here in Australia, is once our sport becomes an Olympic sport, that opens the doors to a lot more funding and opportunities for the sport. So for our way of thinking, if that's the big tick that we can get out of it, that's what I think most of us would hope to gain from it, rather than appearing at the Olympics, which we know is just probably never going to happen. An Olympic part of that family will help USDBF, OSDBF, and all the national federations.
The club cruise coming up in 2022, will there be a cancer division in that event?
At this stage, there is no reason why the
I'm referring to an all cancer division, not BCS, but all cancer.
There has been an all cancer division previously. There was in Szeged. It's just there certainly was a couple of teams entered for France. There has always been, well, not always, but I know that entry has been there. It's just very few countries enter it. And that's always the challenge that we're finding now with some of these, the BCS, the Paradragons, the all cancer survivors, etc. That some of the countries, the more developed countries, are certainly picking it up and pushing those racing classes. But until more countries do it, we then end up with only one team in that entry or two teams in that entry, which is disappointing then for those teams that, train all the time and fundraise and do what they can to go, but then have nobody to race against.
Sure. Okay, great. Melanie, I'm looking at some of the faces here. I think there's some people looking to ask some questions. So I'm going to open it up to if anybody has a question for Melanie. Now's your time, because it's quite an opportunity to have a high-ranking official of IDBF with us to get her in the hot seat here. So who's got Cynthia? Cindy, you got a question?
Oh yeah, I always have questions. Hi, Melanie, and thanks for all the work you're doing. I'm curious about developing the sport in new countries. Do you simply wait for them to make inquiries, or do you actively go out and try to stir up interest?
It's probably, I would say, been a little bit of both. That I know when Mike Haslam many years ago was out and about traveling around, he would bump into, people and start talking about dragon boating, etc. And then others, it's been through different, whether it's been through the Breast Cancer Network or perhaps through a canoe sort of link or whatever, that people have started hearing about dragon boating, particularly in the more established, like the EDBF with the European Dragon Boat Federation. There's still some, whilst the big major countries in Europe are doing it, there's still a lot of the smaller countries that are very canoe based, and they'll slowly start to pick up dragon boating through that if they happen to be running like a festival event. and introduce it as a festival event and have people come and try, then as you guys will know, once you come and try dragon boating, most people get hooked and want to know how they can do it more.
Melanie, I have another question for you about officials. Is the IDBF still looking for officials, and how do you train them? What's the process there?
That's a good question. I guess the international race officials come from all your national race officials. So per se, most of the training is done at a national level. That we like to say that people cut their teeth, if you will, on doing all their events nationally. And then those who, I guess, a lot of people are just happy helping out nationally and doing what they can. Then there's a small percentage who love, I guess, what they do and want to step up to that opportunity and I guess challenge themselves, as you were alluding to a bit earlier, Pat, when you and that it is really different. You step into a country you've never been to, into a venue you've never seen, and perhaps into a country that doesn't speak your language, and you're working with 60 other race officials. Half of, it could be 20 different languages amongst all of them, and you've got to try and bring an event together and have everybody working together as a team. So we try and get everyone to, I guess, learn the ropes nationally, and then once they step up internationally, we then try and train them at an international level. We do run training and have lots of mentoring going on during the championships, and have them working with those people who've been, of the race officials who've been doing it a few more years. So it certainly is challenging, can be a little bit daunting for people. And certainly we're very conscious of the different languages and the different cultural differences as well, and try and make everybody feel part of that team. And I always equate it to that whilst athletes are all part of a team or a club during an event, the race officials are part of a team, and we all have to bond together as part of a team to make a championship work. Because you can imagine if we all lost the plot and didn't, the start weren't talking to the umpires, or the start weren't talking to the finish line, and the race secretary wasn't talking to marshalling, we'd have more people up at the finish tower having a chat to the chief official about issues than what we do at the moment anyway, because you guys like to see an event that's run really smoothly, that what time your race is going, where you're going to next, and all of that stuff. So that puts pressure on the race officials to make sure that we get it right to ensure you guys have the best event possible.
Well, I got to tell you, coming from a coach's perspective, where I have been noted from time to time to submit a protest, that I can't give you guys enough credit. I am just so impressed with the efficiencies and how you're able to run events of that scope with, like, what was the time between races in Szeged? It was like just a couple of minutes or something. It seemed it was really, really tight. 100 races,
yeah.
100 races in a day. And
I think we got up to, in Szeged on the 200 day, I think we did 120 or 25 races on one of the days. I think it was the first day in Szeged, which is why we ran a little bit late behind schedule, which is not a good way to start the championships. And we were down to about 4 to 5 minutes between races, with, I think, did we end up with 8 fleets of boats? 3 fleets of standard boats and 3 fleets of small boats. That's an enormous amount of boats or fleets trying to manage that water circulation, get people in boats, out of boats, up to the start line. The poor water umpires, I probably will hate me to death. It didn't in Pattaya last year. for the 2K racing, a couple of the water umpires, because we just went and went and went because we had so many races, didn't even get a chance to get off the boats to go to the toilet in 8 hours. They were stuck out there because they couldn't get in, we couldn't get them swapped over. So they had to do some very creative things to look after themselves. And so, yes, that was very challenging. We had some very sunburnt people, I have to say, very sunburnt race officials after that day, instead of not very well officials. So they do work really hard.
They do, absolutely. And any of you, if you ever go to an event, you're lucky enough to be at one of these Club Cruiser Nations Cup, any chance you get, you should thank these with an official. You should just express your appreciation, because they do work their butts off and they do an amazing job. Thanks, Melanie. Is there any more questions? I sort of dominated the questions. Anybody else have a question for Melanie? And thanks, Andrew, for hanging in.
Yes, I
Okay, so Eleanor's got one, then I think Mike Kirkman's got one.
Okay, hi Melanie. I was just wondering, to what extent does the IDBF, if any, get involved with the, let's say, management and running of other countries', national federations or associations? Do they exercise any control in the way that they run the, the federation, or, the ethics and that sort of thing?
From what I'm aware of, IDBF does try very hard to stay out of, as much as they can, out of national politics. And it would only be if they've been asked to help or step in to try and bring parties together that they might get involved. But otherwise, they try very hard to not get involved in national politics, because otherwise you can imagine IDBF would spend their entire time just trying to resolve internal conflicts, and they wouldn't be able to get on with what they need to be doing, which is, growing and developing the sport worldwide.
Do you have a process where you deal with complaints?
Does IDBF, is this between countries or between individuals?
If let's say that particular country is not running, or some clubs feel that that particular federation is not running, they're breaking the rules, they're being unethical, they just do what they want. They're not following what they're supposed to be following. So do you have a process whereby if a club came to you and said, this is what's happening here, would you then step in and make inquiries, or, investigate that? Is this the case?
Certainly if the IDBF received letters from clubs or whomever, with issues that were going on, and asked IDBF for help, certainly they would look into it. And particularly if that nation was a member of the IDBF, and if that member wasn't, adhering to what the IDBF membership is all about, or meeting IDBF membership, then the IDBF has that scope then to not accept that member the next time the membership comes up for renewal.
Okay, thank you.
But unless people write and tell the IDBF what's going on, then they don't know.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
We've got time for one more question. Mike, if you want to take the last question.
Okay. Hi, Melanie.
Hey, Mike.
Good to see you again. Listen, I got 2 questions and a comment. Answers just in the interest of getting Andrew up on the screen quickly. First question is, The IOC at their annual meeting a couple of years ago introduced new policies regarding demonstration sports at the Olympic Games going forward. The policy in general terms was that the organizing committee of the Olympics, the Summer Olympics and Winter Olympics, could choose demonstration sports that they wanted to highlight at the event. And for example, in Tokyo, they, among other sports, they were going to introduce surfing. In Paris, amazingly, they were going to introduce gaming as a sport. And in Los Angeles in 2028, the potential for that organizing committee to select Dragon Boat as a demonstration sport exists. And in fact, it exists also because they have two regatta sport venues that are trying to decide between where to host the rowing and canoeing events. So has the IDBF reached out, do you know, to the organizing committee in Los Angeles?
Not as far as I'm aware, Mike, but the IDBF exec have a meeting Saturday night.
Nice.
And so good timing, I shall ask the question.
Okay, that's great. And my second question, Hong Kong 2021, there's some, political question marks. There's also some health question marks. Everybody's kind of got in the back of their mind. Is there a contingency been discussed at council for Hong Kong if things don't work out?
Yes, there is contingency, and there's sort of plan Bs, plan Cs, plan Ds being talked about at the moment. Obviously, I can't share what those are, but there's a lot of conversations at the moment going on in the background as we're all watching what's happening, both from a COVID point of view, but also we're all listening to the news and what's happening politically in Hong Kong as well. So that's certainly something that we're all watching and listening for, and there's a lot of numerous conversations going on with the Hong Kong Organising Committee as well. So it's IDBF are keeping very close watch on what that's happening at the moment, with some contingency plans in place. And if anything was to change, it is likely a drop deadline would be before the end of the year.
Okay, and just a quick comment, your earlier statements on the Club Crew World Championships, trying to pare down the size, put some restrictions. I would hope that the IDBF wouldn't consider doing that for 2022, because historically, as you know, North American events draw only maybe half of the crews that would typically come to a European event.
Yeah, no, certainly I don't believe, as I said, I think if the numbers, we were going to get 6.5 in France, and if it was going to be, say, in Europe again, and it was going to be just as big, we would possibly need to look at it. However, we do know the numbers are a little bit lower in North America than what they are than what they have been in Europe, and given COVID as well, I'm sure that will have an effect on the numbers. So I'm sure we're going to not get 6,000 people in Sarasota.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much.
You're muted, Pat.
Thanks, Liz. Apparently I was muted. Thanks, Melanie. Appreciate it so much that you joined us. We haven't had anybody from IDBF join us and to be able to present like that. So a real eye-opener for all of us to get a little bit of insight into the IDBF. Congratulations to you and everybody there, and please express it on our behalf. You guys do a ton of work. we see it. I'm amazed at what you guys can accomplish. So thanks for providing us with the sport and for the international opportunities.
That's okay. And thank you. And it's nice to see so many happy, smiling faces.
All right, everybody, you can unmute and say good night now.
That's right. I was going to listen to Andrew.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right, well then, without any further ado, and thanks for hanging in, Andrew. Andrew, as I mentioned, is the president of the U.S. Dragon Boat Federation, and he's been the president since 2017. Andrew's from Montgomery, Alabama, and where he founded and started a festival there in 2010, I think.
Yep, 2010.
And so Andrew is with us, and he's going to talk to us about the USDBF, its role and relationship with the IDBF, and what's cool and what's going on with the U.S. Dragon Boat Federation. So welcome, Andrew, and thank you for joining us too. What time is it where you are?
It is 10:40 in the morning.
Oh, good morning. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about the USDBF? Like what's the USDBF role domestically, like nationally, and also relationship with the IDBF?
Sure. This is a good question because I think a lot of people kind of wonder what it is that we actually do. So first off, thank you so much for having me on this morning. I'm excited to be talking to you all, and I'm excited to be seeing a lot of new faces as well. We operate in a pretty small circle of individuals at the administrative level for the USDBF, so I'm glad to see that there's other people interested in hearing about what we are doing. Quite simply, our job is to work to grow the sport of dragon boating. It is also to kind of do some of the primary administrative tasks that a lot of you see us doing: certifying clubs, producing a national championship, sending clubs to Club Crew World Championships, and organizing Team USA. But behind all that, there is a whole lot of time and energy dedicated to making sure that those tasks are supported in the right way. And I'll give you a good example. We have national championships coming up next year in Sarasota, Florida. And there's about 15 to 20 people who are meeting weekly, have been for months now, and will be up until that event, who are organizing everything from officiating, lodging, transportation, negotiations, and contracts with all the different vendors that it takes to execute a national championship, like the venue itself and Nathan Benderson Park, and all of the partners that we have for that. We also do things, like the Team USA program, where we have a high performance committee that spends months selecting the coaches, overseeing the training programs that those coaches have, and then organizing all of the logistics for sending 300 people, adults and children, halfway around the world, and making sure that they're well supported when they are there. We're also trying to do some things where we're supporting our member regions. The United States Dragon Boat Federation is pretty unique in our membership structure. Our members are the 4 primary regions that make up the U.S. So we have Eastern region, Southeast, American or Midwest, and the West Coast or Pacific Dragon Boat Federation. And so we try and support those organizations as well. So the USDBF really is kind of a parent federation, a governing body of sport that does try and do a lot of the oversight to make sure that our paddlers get the experience that they want to have in whatever venue that we're supporting them in. We've been working a lot over the years to try and figure out ways to grow the sport, especially amongst youth, and we've been relying heavily on our region members to work on that. We are getting to a point at which we need to seriously start backfilling talent at the younger levels, because we're seeing paddlers move through from the premier all the way through the different senior categories. And now, our most robust paddling actually happens in the seniors. And we want to really reverse that trend and make that be something for the juniors as well. In terms of our relationship to the IDBF, we are a member of the IDBF. We try our best to support the different programs of the IDBF and the different federations. So we're a member of the Pan American Dragon Boat Federation, which kind of governs our hemisphere, the United States, Canada, South America, and Central America. And then every 2 years, we, as I said, send teams to either Club Crew or to Nations Cup. And as a part of that function, the president of the USDBF attends Congress, where we try and agitate for the things that we think are in the best interest of larger nations like the USDBF. And Melanie's laughing a little bit because we had it out a little bit at this last Congress, but I think one of the unique things about the United States Dragon Boat Federation, as one of the largest participants at international competitions, our interests do vary from those of smaller nations. And I'm not saying that ours are more important, they just vary. So for a good example, as I said earlier, is that we have one of the more robust senior programs in the world. And so that's something, as in my role as president of USDBF, is that I advocate for that. And I want to see that continue to be a staple. And I totally understand the counter arguments for, like we were talking about Senior C at this last Congress. I understand why people might say that there's different ways that we could be doing things, but I understand my job is to really represent the paddlers that live in the United States. And so oftentimes you do see a good dichotomy between larger nations like the USDBF and Dragon Boat Canada advocating for some things, and then some of the smaller European nations or Asian nations advocating for things. And hopefully the IDBF continues to keep a good balance, which I think they are, in representing all of our interests in the sport.
All right. What's new and exciting? What's going on, and what's coming down the pipe with USDBF? What are we working on?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'd say the most exciting thing that we have domestically right now is national championships next year. When I first came on as president, one of my goals was to really bolster the national championship event. And I've been working hard with the competition and technical committee, who has some wonderful longstanding USDBF board members who've been working hard on that event over the years. We knew that in order for our federation to grow, specifically the USDBF, we needed to do more programming on our own that would help grow the sport, but also give us contact with as many paddlers as possible. So as a lot of you may know, and if you aren't aware yet, we made the decision that starting in 2021, all of the berths for Club Crew World Championships would be distributed at national championships and no longer be distributed at the regional championship events. And a lot of people, there was some arguments on both sides, and I understand that that did have an impact to the regions in some small ways. But we knew that, as the national governing body, it's our job. Those berths belong to us, and that we really wanted to bring as many paddlers into one venue to really show how far the sport has come, to show our growth, and to give everybody the opportunity and motivation to compete with each other at an annual event that was produced by us. This will be the first time that the USDBF is producing its own event as well. Previously, we would have partnered with a race event producer. This time we are self-producing that event. And we're really excited about it. Sarasota is a world-class venue. Nathan Benderson Park, for anybody that has not been there, is probably the best racing venue that this country has. And when Melanie and Mike come to come see that, they're gonna see that it's maybe one of the best racing venues in the entire world. It is absolutely incredible what they have out there. Everything from the 5-story 360-degree racing officials tower, the wave attenuator. For those of you who have never seen a bubble finish, I've never seen a bubble finish. It's one of the coolest things you've ever seen. The start docks and everything. So Nationals is really kind of the big ticket item that's new. But some of the other things that are new for us as well, we have started a level 1 online virtual officials training course, which has been something that we were really pushed to do because of COVID, but now we're realizing is actually a great tool for us to try and attract potential new officials. We are studying and looking at our membership structure going forward. And we're continuing to see a growth and interest in Team USA and people wanting to go to Club Crew World Championship events. The sport, as I said, is alive and well and growing. And we're trying to adjust the federation as best we can to handle that kind of growth. That's probably one of our biggest challenges is just the rapid growth of the sport.
Well, I was just going to ask you, what's your greatest challenge?
Well, I'll say USDBF president, we don't have just one challenge. We have multiple challenges. But I'll go through just a couple. as I said, growth of participation is tough. And like I said earlier, when we represent ourselves at the international level, it's important for us to advocate for the things that matter to our paddlers. But also, when we look at growth, as I said earlier, probably one of our biggest challenges is the development of youth paddling here. Organizing Team USA for youth is one of the most difficult things that we do. There's no point in sugarcoating it. Dragon boating is a pay-to-play sport. And because of that, it's hard to finance youth participation, especially since it's not a traditional high school sport. So kids are not getting funding to participate in dragon boating in their schools like they would if they were soccer players, baseball players, basketball players. The equipment that we use, as you all know, is expensive. Boats are expensive. Boathouse storage is expensive, all that kind of stuff. So growing the youth programs is a big challenge and a big difficulty for us. One of the other things that I think is difficult, and one thing that I've been trying to push as president of USDBF, is finances. We have to stop treating dragon boating like it's a niche community sport that people do once a year for fundraising festivals. If we are going to compete with other niche sports like stand-up paddleboarding, or I give this example all the time, the American Ultimate Disc League, who just finished a $10 million round of funding for their sport through a capital campaign, we have to start treating our sport like other federations do. It's a business first, even though we are a nonprofit, and we have to continue to look and push for strategic partnerships that will help us grow. And we have to make tough decisions, sometimes tough decisions that force us to do new things that will hopefully bring in strategic partners, even though it's kind of breaking the chain of the way we've done things in the past. If we can do that, I think dragon boating is a very compelling sport and something that we could really exponentially grow over the next 10 to 20 years. But every sport that's successful in doing that does that by reaching out to their manufacturing partners, reaching out to merchandising, reaching out to all these other areas, relinquishing some of the control that we've traditionally had over the sport, and really coming up with a long-term strategic plan and vision that will help us grow into something that will be unrecognizable to the community right now. And part of the way we do that, and one of the final challenges I think that I see at the federation level, is lack of participation or lack of willingness to get involved with the actual federation itself. I hear all the time from our regions and from the board and from our committees that it's so difficult to recruit people to participate, whether it be on, as I said, competition and technical committees, at the regional level as board members, what have you. However, I'm also continuously told that there are a lot of critics of our organization who have a lot to say about what we are doing. And one thing that I cannot figure out is why our critics and a lot of people that have a lot of good ideas, good input, want to help this organization, kind of don't get up off the floor and come join us. We really do struggle with that. And so one of the things that we're doing now is we've created some new officer positions at our last annual general meeting. We're working on a new communications plan to connect directly with paddlers. So I hope that we can grow the actual participation in the sport and at the federation level, so that those ideas about strategic partnerships and ways that we can grow and new ideas about doing things can be heard at the top administrative level. So I think those are kind of some of the big challenges we have. Like any other federation, there are numerous things that we probably could be doing and should be doing better, but we're working really hard to try and address some of those issues right now.
Wow, that's great. Thanks, Andrew. And I know for one that's fairly close to the USDBF and have some relationships with people that are on the board and so on. It's really nice to see that there is a positive swing to the USDBF. It went through some issues several years ago, and it really appears that, and under your leadership, Andrew, that it sort of picked itself up, dusted itself off, and away you go. You got some really strong people on that committee. I understand your quest for more people to get involved. Unfortunately, some athletes are athletes. They just want to show up with their t-shirt and their paddle and their seat pad and go. But hopefully with your drive that, you know, and then that USDBF is moving ahead with these initiatives, especially the national championships. I think that's a huge positive step for USDBF. And I got to ask you, how big do you think this event's going to be? Like, do you have any idea how many crews you think might be attracted to this?
In Sarasota, well, I mean, I think, and I saw a question earlier, and yes, we are going to have standard and small boat racing at nationals. I've seen that pop up in the chat a couple of times. It's going to be a big event. It's probably going to be it will be the biggest national championship event we've ever had. My pre-COVID numbers that we were working with was roughly 70 to 80 crews as what we were targeting, with the opportunity to have, you know, 10 or more or 10 less, you know, kind of in that 60 to 80, 60 to 90 crews range. That largely depends. I mean, I think it's going to actually could potentially be even bigger because the prize, the berths that will be awarded will be for an event that's happening back in Sarasota, which I think is a really unique thing for American crews because, you know, you think about how expensive it is for us to travel to Club Crew World Championships in other locations, that these crews that are securing berths and vying for berths will be able to return to their backyard for the World Club Crews in 2022. And I'm pretty hopeful for those 2022 Club Crew Championships. I'm hoping that the quality of racing and the race course itself, the venue and whatnot, will really encourage a lot of international athletes to travel to the United States. I know that the US and the Western Hemisphere tends to have a bad reputation for attracting crews for World Championship events, but hopefully what they've seen out of Sarasota will create the envy and will drive a lot of people there. So we're excited about it, but it's going to be big. Nationals is going to be a real spectacle this time around.
I think so too. It's going to be amazing, and it's going to be such a thrill to have home field advantage, whatever that means. So wherever the officials are, Melanie, you got to make sure that we get the fast lane, right? Andrew, tell them I wanted to make a comment about the officials course that USDBF is offering right now. I refer coaches all the time to take that course, whether you want to be an official or not. It's a short course. I think it's a one-day course, but I think it's a really good idea for any of you that are going to be in a leadership role at all in your club to take an officials course and get an understanding of what officials go through. So the next time you're PO'd because something didn't go right in a race, I think it's really helpful. It's helpful for me to know what the official's perspective is and what their side of it is and what their role is. All they're trying to do is keep things fair. Are they going to be right all the time? No. But the decisions are made for the right reasons and within a framework. And I think the more people that understand that, the smoother these events are going to go. And sorry, Melanie, but you guys will make less money on protests if people understand that. Yeah.
Well, and I think that it's kind of just the natural evolution of everything. I mean, the important thing when it comes to our sport is that you have a base of people that are knowledgeable in the way that we execute our events. And that's definitely a part of it. But also, it's good for clubs, especially local clubs, to be continuing their education in the sport so that at their local festivals, for example, they can encourage race producers to continue to have, you know, fair competition, to encourage other people to adopt the competitive spirit that dragon boating has. It's just another great way for people to get involved. And I think one of the things that's really unique about the officials course is that previously, you know, we were always training people and we were investing in people and having these courses that were in locations that people had to pay all this money for, because we wanted each person that came into the room to face with their trainer, make a commitment to growing in their kind of officials journey. Now we're flipping the script on that. And we're saying, look, we don't care if you don't want to go beyond the one-day level 1 course. We want you to have that base knowledge because we think it's better to have an informed paddler community than not. So yeah, I don't think that it's important, you know, same with the coaching course, you know, you don't have to be a coach after taking a level 1 coaching course to at least take the things that you've learned in that course and communicate them to your crews or to your community, or as I said, to your festivals and whatnot. So the more people we can get involved in that, to me, that's just like a great way to hook people in. People take that course and they want to learn more about the sport. And eventually they end up being like me and coming up into the more administrative roles, which I think is super important. Again, I think a lot of times in the past, people have been intimidated by the structure and this kind of governing body and whatnot, but we're all just individuals who care a whole lot about this sport. We're all unpaid volunteers when we participate in this way. For those of you that don't know, I'm not a paddler and I am not a coach. I'm not an official. I ran a community festival, grew to love the sport. I love nonprofit administration and management. And so I spent, I've invested the last 10 years of my life in growing my participation in the USDBF. And it, while I'm surrounded by people that have had much more experience on the water than I will ever have in my lifetime, we don't have a local club even here in Montgomery. That's not necessarily like a barrier to entry. And so I really do encourage everybody, even if you're kind of not as active in the paddling community anymore, to just find other ways. We need people to be participating at all levels and contributing in all different ways at the USDBF.
Great. Any questions for Andrew?
Pat, this is John. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, John.
How you doing? Great. Thank you for all the work you're doing. Really, seriously, I know the USDBF is like Pat said, we're really coming around, and I'm excited to see the work that the leadership's doing. I guess my question is, I know we've got the officials training course, we've got level 1 coaching now, level 2 coaching. Any consideration for a national level on steers training? Sort of minimum standards on steers?
Yeah, so we've had that floating around. I've heard that talked about, and one of the things that really, I think one of the doors that was really opened by us finally agreeing to a system for the level 1 coaching certification was, how do we do this? I mean, in the past, we've had a bit of a struggle trying to figure out how we do certification. Do we do it ourselves? Do we have to develop it ourselves? Do we have to have ownership? A lot of people reference Dragon Boat Canada, who has a national training program for coaching and steering and all these things. And what we learned with the process, and I worked with Pat a little bit, and we really banged our head against the wall a lot trying to figure out how to do it, was that finally we realized, at least in the United States right now, there's already a lot of providers that have created these programs. They're wonderful programs. And as long as we can agree at the federation level that they meet minimum standards for the training and safety, that we can begin certifying those. So now that you've seen officials going to this virtual mode, but really the level 1 coaches now having a system, I think other training programs like steering will end up coming on board and keep, pounding away at that. I mean, Barbara Michaels, who's the head of our competition and technical committee, that's one of the things, is that oftentimes we don't always know what it is you all want, because you grumble about it amongst your clubs, you talk about it amongst your fellow paddlers, but we don't hear about it. I don't hear about it. So, we're an open door organization. And just a side note to that is that all of our board of directors meetings that we hold quarterly are open to the public, and we never have guests on them. We're going to start posting those dates on our Facebook page and when we develop this new newsletter system. But I want you all to tune in and ask a question like that during the question and answer session at the very end, so that the board, the decision makers, can hear from all of you. And I think that connection, which has not existed in the past, will be a wonderful thing for us getting those ideas moving forward. So that was a long answer, but thank you, John.
You're welcome. Thanks, Andrew. That was great. I appreciate the perspective. Thank you. Very helpful.
Yep. What else?
Judy, I think you had a question.
Sure.
Okay. First of all, Andrew, 4 more years, 4 more years, 4 more years. But thank you very much. I had the pleasure of meeting you twice. The most recent was at Pattaya. You took a picture with our Senior C national team. Yep. So really appreciate you reaching out and attending our celebration.
Yes, of course.
We're getting ready for the nationals, and we understand it's no longer going to be regional. So are the berth awarded going to be the same, or is it going to be different?
Different in what way?
Well, before it was the first place winner of each region plus national. And then if you went to national, if you placed in the top 3, you got the selection of standard boat or small boat. So how is that format different if not?
Yeah, so I don't want to get this wrong, but I believe the best that I know is that it's going to be run where it's just going to be competitive based. So it's going to be the top 5 crews in the races themselves that'll determine, and there will be small boat and standard boat categories. The one thing I do know too is that our plan is to distribute all of the berths at nationals. And as of now, as we're trying to encourage participation in that, I do not think that there will be a petition system after the event is over. We are intending on distributing every berth based on the participation at nationals. And that's really to, one, drive participation in the sport, but also it'll be a harder kind of petition process because the regions are kind of readdressing how they're handling their regional championships. So if you're looking for a berth, come, paddle your butts off, and if you finish in one of those top places, then you'll be guaranteed a berth based on how you finish in that category at nationals. Go ahead.
Second question, and maybe you'll have it on the website in the near future, and if you do, just have me table it until I read it on the website. But I was one of the 2 teams that was going to be in the All Cancer Survivor, my team.
Sure.
And so we were looking forward to it, but we do want to increase and grow the sport. So we do have an all cancer team, and I'm developing a breast cancer team.
Yep.
So we're looking forward to it being at the national level and then hopefully in the international level. But in the meantime, I'm curious to whether or not there's a potential of having a senior D division, as in dog.
Sure. So as of right now, I've not heard of that conversation. And obviously, it's one of those things that we have to do in conjunction with the IDBF. I mean, like having a senior D division at nationals that gives false hope for international participation is not something that we would probably be encouraging right now. And I will tell you, I mean, it is one of saving the senior C division last time around in Pattaya was something that, that we lobbied really hard for. And as I said, I understood the arguments on the other side, but in keeping senior C at the international level, we now have the responsibility of working with the IDBF to encourage other developing nations to grow their senior C programs first. And then maybe in the future, we reach that point in which we have a senior D or what have you. But for right now, keeping the senior C program as it is kind of how we're tracking forward. And all of those kind of as I said, division adding opportunities would only come, once the IDBF gave us their blessing, but really it won't come until the IDBF and countries like ours encourage developing nations to continue to grow their senior C programs first. I mean, Thailand was what it was. I mean, there was 3 or 4 nations total that were racing in the senior C categories. And that's wonderful that we had 3 or 4. I want it to be 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 the next time around. And then, and the only way to do that is for us to work with the IDBF to encourage them to continue pushing senior C forward.
Liz, did you have a question?
Well, Andrew, you really piqued my curiosity. I wondered what a bubble finish was. I'd never heard the term.
Oh, so a bubble finish, basically, I don't know how relevant it would be for dragon boating, but basically at the finish line, they have a strip of pressed air that's right under the surface. And so especially for rowers who are their butts are much closer to the water, they just row until they feel the vibration of the bubbles underneath them. And that's how they know when they can stop. But it looks super cool too, and it makes for great photo finishes, like photos. So again, I don't know how relevant it'll be for dragon boating, but it's basically just a strip of forced air that pushes bubbles up to the surface. So not like cascading, but just it's more about the vibration underneath the water.
Thank you.
What other questions?
I've got another question. I don't know if it's for you or for Melanie. At club cruise, do the host countries are they ever granted more entries?
No, they're not. And I will say that, you know, one of the things that we're hoping out of the Sarasota event, and I'm kind of lobbying Melanie here a little bit, is that, you know, we are hoping that what we can do in Sarasota as hosts is really show the IDBF kind of a good plan and work with the existing playbook, but really show them how, what it is that, like, you know, a venue like Nathan Benderson Park can provide the paddling community and the standards that we want to see for our athletes going forward. I mean, we were really excited to get the Sarasota bid, but it is a huge burden for us to have to produce this event. You know, we, as I said before, we agitate a lot and we demand excellence out of the IDBF, especially when it comes to their event hosting. And so we better do a darn good job of hosting an event on our own. The USDBF is committed to working with Sarasota to make sure that it is a world-class event, because we want to demonstrate, you know, what we think the standard of competition and event production should be on the international stage moving forward.
All right. Any other questions? We got time for another question for Andrew before we head on to our Mondrell moment. Any other questions? Oh, Liz?
It's for Andrew and for Melanie. I have a little special interest regarding Paradragon Division. And so I think you touched on it, Melanie. There is going to be an IDBF Paradragon Division for 2022. And Andrew, will there be a Paradragon Division at Nationals next year?
As far as IDBF are concerned at the moment anyway, yes, we would offer Paradragons, but as with any of these new developing racing classes, it all is dependent on the number of entries we actually get. So and unfortunately we never know until 6 months out which countries are doing that. However, I know I was speaking to Mark a couple of weeks ago that where IDBF will try and chat to a few of the big countries who have been doing a little bit of work in that area, just to see who might be thinking of putting in a team, because at the moment we've really only had the Philippines came to Thailand, and the Purple Warriors from the UK were the only team that came to Szeged. So that's very disappointing. The same with the All Cancer Survivors. I think the US, from memory, may have been the only team that were going to be the only team that had an All Cancer Survivor team in France this year. So that's really for us the really hard thing, that we're trying to offer these racing classes, because everyone, you know, countries are lobbying to say, can we have these? And it's a bit of a double-edged sword that the IDBF offer these because you guys want them, only to discover when you train for 12 months and spend thousands of dollars to go somewhere overseas, you're the only team competing in that racing class because no other country has entered it. And that's very frustrating on everybody's behalf.
I'll kind of echo that sentiment. I know that the Competition and Technical Committee is working on Paradragons for participation at Nationals. I don't know where they stand with that, but Melanie makes a really good point, and it's about participation. And really, there's a lot of things that we all want to have in the sport, and the United States is blessed with having, well, obviously a high population, but a high population of people participating in the sport of dragon boating. We do have to remember that we are an anomaly on the world dragon boating stage. Even when it comes to larger nations, they don't necessarily have the development of the sport that we have here. And so, especially at the international level, we have to find that balance. And that's one of the things that Melanie and I think, have done well over the last couple of Congresses, is finding a balance between what matters to the United States and what matters to everybody else. But again, I will make a plug that whether it's Paradragons, whether it's youth development, like, you all are obviously tuned in, you're playing key roles in the dragon boat sport in your communities. You all have to continue to drive this growth, right? I need people that are listening and attending this to encourage kids in their cities and towns to get in a boat, to maybe invite and reach out to organizations that work with potential para-athletes, to bring them out and get into your boats and to learn more about the sport. Once we have an overwhelming presence of people in a specific group paddling in the sport, the IDBF will welcomely embrace them and will bring them into the sport and will help those divisions grow. So we do have the unique opportunity of being able to potentially organize lots of para-dragon clubs to get to, World Club Cruise, so that there is good competition there. And then Melanie can go back to the IDBF executive committee and say, we really have something going on here. And when you go to international competitions and when you have Zoom calls with international paddlers, talk to them about and encourage them to continue to invite new people into the sport. I'm not kidding you. Like, the way the trajectory is for the United States right now is that we are going to look vastly different in 20 years if we cannot start recruiting young paddlers to paddle, if we cannot start branching out and encouraging all cancer teams to develop, to encourage para-dragons. Other sports are going to take those kinds of athletes away from us and give them a home that we should be giving them here. But I can say that, and I can, yell it from the tallest tower, but I'm not in your communities. Y'all are the ones that are going to drive participation in those special divisions.
Wow. Well said. Well said, Andrew. Okay.
Pat, I have a quick question for Andrew and Melanie while they're both on the phone in regards to the all cancer and BCS divisions.
Okay, last one.
It's very difficult sometimes to fill a 20-man boat when your division is pretty specific. So if we could have 10-man boats, it's a lot easier to fill a 10-man boat when we're looking for a breast cancer survivor or an all cancer person to fill those boats. So the 20-man boats are great, but you'd have more participation if 10-man boats were offered as a division. We have to qualify in 20-man boats, which means we have to find 20 breast cancer survivors. If we could qualify in a 10-man boat, that would be great.
Melanie, you want to take that first, or?
I was rattling my brains, just thinking, and my brain's starting to get a bit tired now. For some reason, I was under the impression we did offer 10s racing in the BCS and all cancer survivors. I'm sure I thought we did for Club Cruise this year in France. And I certainly know one of the challenges, and I know we've had conversations with the US about it, and we've done it with the juniors, when the juniors have been offered standard and small boats, and then when the entries have come in and we've discovered that we've only got one country entered a standard boat and 5 countries entered a small boat, we've worked with those junior countries to allow that country who's entered standard boat to put in 2 small boats, so that, because there's no point in one team competing, to allow them to be able to do that. So my understanding was that we did offer small boats in all cancer survivor and breast cancer survivor. If that's not the case and my memory is wrong, then I apologize, but I had thought we did.
Yeah, and I'll just again echo that and saying that I'll look into seeing what the plan is for all cancer at CCNC next year. But I appreciate the question. I appreciate hearing from you, because it does highlight the fact that, I didn't know necessarily that it is as much of a struggle to do 10 versus 20. This is why we need to hear from our greater membership, is that we need those points of feedback to help inform how we plan and program events like national championships. So I appreciate that, and please, follow up on that with us, stay involved, so that we're not forgetting that important, point that you made.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the answers.
Yep, Pat, you're muted.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, Blynn, I'm on the technical committee for nationals, and that's something I will mention to them. I understand your question about having to qualify in a standard boat for a small boat position. That's a USDBF issue, not an IDBF one. So I'll raise that at the next meeting to see what everybody thinks. But that is a good point. Okay, so thanks everybody. We run late, but it's been fascinating discussion, great questions. And now we're going to wrap up with the Mondrell moment. Mondrell, are you there?
I'm there. I'm here.
From the jungles of Wisconsin, Mike Mondrell, what have you got for us today?
So first, a thought, before I get into my timed segment here, a thought just crossed my mind about the bubble finish. So I'm picturing our boat gliding across the finish line. Then I'm picturing, I can hear Coach Bradley yelling, "Mondrell, why did you stop paddling?" And I simply say, I could feel the bubbles. Right? Okay. I got my timer. Last week I went 20 seconds over. I'm gonna try to go 5 minutes. I'm gonna start right now. Go. Okay. The Mondrell moment today is about the famous American baseball player Mickey Mantle. Mickey Mantle played in the 1950s, 1960s. He's regarded as one of the best players to ever play the game of baseball. 536 career home runs. He hit over 310 times in his career. 3-time Gold Glove winner, so he could hit and he could field. One of the things he's most best known for is that he's considered the best switch hitter in the game of baseball. Switch hitter is someone that can bat right-handed and also bat left-handed. So where I'm going with this is, let's talk about switch hitters in dragon boating. So switch hitters in dragon boating would be paddlers that can paddle both sides. This is sort of a big mystery to me because there are so few, in my opinion, switch hitters in dragon boating. A lot of people just paddle one side. If you, as a paddler, let's use myself as an example. Based on my size and weight, I could paddle 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, or 10, which means in a race lineup, there's probably, if I paddle only one side of the boat, there's 6 possible seats I could sit in. If I paddle both sides, I double that. Now there's 12 spots in that boat where I can sit and paddle. So this is good for paddlers because it gives you more opportunity to race because there's more places where the coach can insert you in the lineup. This is especially good for coaches because they're trying to work lineups where I can try to work everyone in. At times it becomes frustrating because you want to get somebody in, but you're strong on the right. You don't want to take somebody out, but if there's somebody you can move to the other side and then get that paddler in, it really helps. So it helps in creating race lineups when you have switch hitters or paddlers that can paddle both sides of the boat. During Mickey Mantle's career, at one point he was involved in a collision at second base. He injured his shoulder. As a result of this shoulder injury, he was struggling hitting left-handed. If he was only a left-handed hitter, he probably would have been benched or he would have been put on the disabled list. But because he could also hit right-handed, he stayed in the lineup and he still played every day. So this is another point about paddling both sides. If you get an injury in dragon boat and you only paddle one side, you're basically out until that injury heals. If you can paddle the other side, you stay in the boat. You just switch over to the other side. You paddle that side until the injury heals. Also, I think moving back and forth helps kind of creates balance. It doesn't create overuse injuries. What else? Let me talk about excuses. Like I said, this is kind of a mystery to me why so few people want to paddle both sides, but I hear a lot of excuses as to why people don't want to paddle on the other side. something like, when I was 5 years old, I tripped over the family dog and I injured my shoulder, and now I can't paddle on that side as a result of that injury. Stuff like that. It's just crazy stuff. Another thing you hear a lot is, what you ask somebody if they want to try the other side. Well, no, I tried it once and it didn't go well. Well, of course it didn't go well. It's the first time you tried it. Try it again. Try it again. It's not going to go well the first time, but you got to keep working at it. I guess what I'm trying to say here is just it's called practice for a reason. This is where we work on things that we are going to train and carry into racing. If you get a chance, please try the other side and make yourself into a switch hitter in the sport of dragon boating. I'm at 4 minutes and 52 seconds. I'm basically done. Good for you, Mondrell. Okay, back to you, Pat.
But where's your board?
Well, okay, my board, I had a quote, but it was too long. It didn't fit on the boat or on the board. It was basically Mickey Mantle talking about when he was a kid. He said he used to come home from school and he used to practice batting in his backyard, and his father and his grandfather would take turns pitching to him. When his father would pitch to him, he would bat right-handed. When his grandfather would pitch to him, he would bat left-handed. But it was just too much to put on the board. But I'll bring the board next time, but I'll probably go a little over then. So by eliminating the board, I kept it short.
Thanks, Mondrell. And for those of you that don't know, Mondrell was a national team member and coaches an elite competitive women's crew up in northern Wisconsin, up in the jungles up there. So anyway, thanks again, Mondrell. And thanks to everybody. We went over today, but I haven't heard any complaints on the chat line or anything. It was great, great discussion, great points from Andrew and Melanie. I don't see Melanie. I don't know if she's departed or not, but is she gone? You know, bless her heart, eh? What time is it there? 2 o'clock in the morning?
2:30 in the morning.
2:30 in the morning. Jeez. Hope she doesn't.
I wanted to add USDBF officials course. The next course is going to be on September the 19th. If anybody's interested, pass it on.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Andrew, thanks a ton, man. That was great.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope to see you all soon. Please stay in touch and stay engaged. It's the only thing that will help this organization grow and move forward.
Okay, just a sec. Mike Kirkman has something he wants to add. You're muted. You're muted, Mike.
No, Pat, that's fine. You said you had no complaints, so I just said I want to lodge a complaint.
Oh.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
Okay, well there's a $50 fee for protests, so you can just put that in the mail.
All right, checks in the mail.
Okay, thanks again, everybody. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week.